That's the topic. Video games to bang to.
Oh, I love how the implication is there's probably, but not necessarily, 3 people in the room, minimum.
Yeah. Somebody has to play the game while this is happening.
But again, it could be one of the 2 involved, but now we need some high dex rolls.
You have some specific positions that make it possible to use a controller.
This is so good. If there's a video game that you can play co-op in whilst smashing, what is it?
Before we begin, the Gamer's Advocate would like to remind you that any episode could contain game spoilers, so watch or listen with discretion. And now your hosts, AM Comnenos, Banana, and Legion. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to another episode of the Gamer's Advocate podcast. I'm joined with the glorious and infamous BananaHammockRepublic.
I don't know about either of those words, but hi.
Illustrious. And myself, Legion Gray. Also, just Legion is fine. It's so funny. I've tacked on that gray. I've told this story so many times. I tacked on that gray several years ago, but it's been there just as long as it hasn't been there. So I just go by Legion, and that's always been my gamer tag forever. And I had to add a surname per Google, and Google said, "Hey, if you're gonna get a Gmail, you have to have a surname." Back then, they required it. I don't think they do anymore. And so I put in, I just put Gray. It's been there ever since. But I was all my StarCraft, my Age of Empires, when I was doing RTSs, stuff online at Battle.net, always just Legion. It's not like there was a huge back when everybody was on dial-up doing. doing stuff that, if you had a gamer tag, it was usually pretty straightforward. They didn't have all like the crazy inverted letters and stuff that came shortly after, but not at the very beginning. Before we just use Legion
Because of like the way Microsoft's Xbox Live is set up, every username has to be unique, and there was like this investigation into how many of the remaining just 4 character names are still available, and it's like none of them. Like, somebody's chosen every combination of 4 characters on that service at this point.
Yeah, and of course Banana got his from through spite. Anything is possible.
Yeah, pretty much. I had somebody comment on the way I dressed, and I just replied with, "I don't shop at Banana Hammock Republic," and I've held on to that title since then.
Yeah, if you've been doing Twitch for a while or something like that, that's who you're known as, and so to change it takes a lot of commitment. I couldn't do it. There's no way.
Yeah. I've had a few friends who've had to like rebrand and things like that, but I think once you start like building a community, it gets a little tougher to make those decisions. Say like, oh, I'm gonna start all over again.
Like, I've seen some people who said, you know what, this is going to be my game, this is going to be my thing, this is going to be my jam. I'm like, be careful with that, because that doesn't always last forever.
Yeah.
Like if Diablo 4 is going to be your thing, because a lot of people like started really big on Diablo 3. So they got their big start, and their streaming career started with Diablo 3. But to say Diablo 3 is my gamer tag persona, I don't know. That's a little dangerous, because then again, like I said, better games come along, or maybe your game gets updated to nothing, they bad patch or two.
Yeah, it's always a risk, like making that commitment to one game or series, even, because I mean, you look at like Mass Effect. We got tied to Mass Effect, and then Andromeda came out, and you're like, I don't feel as great about this series as I used to.
You had a game.
I had an idea. for That's Nice. We've had a few episodes without Com that we've had to record with just me and Legion, and primarily we've talked about Baldur's Gate because we're both huge fans of that series, and it's one of the games that Com is kind of working his way through still, so it doesn't feel as selfish to discuss it while he's not here. But fans of Baldur's Gate will probably recognize another game, and it runs on a similar engine. It's built around the same set of rules from D&D that Baldur's Gate was. The game Icewind Dale. And Legion and I have probably mentioned on the podcast at some point that we're not nearly as big of fans of Icewind Dale as we are of Baldur's Gate. So I thought it would be a good choice for the two of us to do a little That's Nice about Icewind Dale.
The thing I like about Icewind Dale is the art in it is superb. I was a sucker for it because I do like frozen biomes. I do like the colder look. I like that wintry type of effect in a lot of games. It's not something that I would say like, oh, that what sold me on it, but the fact that it had it was like, okay, it was the next iteration, not necessarily from BioWare, obviously, but they were using the same engine. And so that engine was like, if they can translate that to anything close to what I love about Baldur's Gate, it's going to be a good game. And that's where it did. You know, it's not like a complete failure. I don't really prefer to play it because the problem is that, again, this is only nice things, but the story that's there could be fleshed out. And the nice thing about it is that I've often told Banana that I think that's where Larian should go. Since they're in cahoots with the Wizards of the Coast, we did Baldur's Gate. Let's do Icewind Dale. Icewind Dale is an open story. Could be done. They would be all restricted like they were in Baldur's Gate, where you had to like have a certain lore tie. So the nice thing about Icewind Dale is there's a lot of open lore there available to them that they could use. There's so many different types of monsters, and the dragons that they had there were so uniquely different. Because they're all living in this harsh world, and you get to see the relationship between things like the kobolds, which are more dragon-like. I know a lot of times they get seen like little dogs, but they're more dragon-like in their history, and so they just serve the dragons. And in that type of environment, you get to see a lot more of that symbiosis going on between them. So there's a lot of good potential story there. But like I said, that art was just phenomenal. A lot of the character portrait architecture, some of that stuff I would pull that in and use them as my Baldur's Gate art, because it was just so good.
I think they did that with the enhanced edition.
Yeah.
Some of the artwork from Icewind Dale is now available in Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition because it was great.
Yeah. And that was my 2 cents on it. I mean, I think it's a really good game. It doesn't compare from a story standpoint, but other than that, it's a phenomenal game.
Yeah, and I think that's where most of our criticisms lie with that comparison to Baldur's Gate, is that one of the things we appreciate most about Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 is the story. And the gameplay is solid. It's just it takes a backseat to the story, which is what we appreciate most about that game. And Icewind Dale had a different focus. Like, the gameplay in that is, I would say, better than Baldur's Gate. The available equipment to you makes for a more strategic decision making in basically how you build your characters and how you engage in combat. There's a lot more variety. There's a lot more equipment. There's more spells. There's a little bit more of everything on the combat focus, but the focus on the story wasn't as significant as it was in Baldur's Gate. So for us who are very story focused gamers, we kind of like make that a criticism. But if you're not as focused on the story, then Icewind Dale is probably the better game in your opinion. And that I definitely remember switching back and forth, because I played Icewind Dale Enhanced Edition and Baldur's Gate 1 Enhanced Edition kind of side by side, and switching back and forth thinking like, man, I wish that piece of equipment from Icewind Dale was in Baldur's Gate, or that spell from Icewind Dale was in Baldur's Gate. And there are a few things tied to the story of Icewind Dale that I did really like. And one of them is the story of Jared. I think that's his name. If you're familiar with the story of Final Fantasy IX, there's a moment where you meet the summon Rama, and he kind of tells you to piece together a story of a group of soldiers who go out on this quest, and one person makes a sacrifice. And then at the end, as you're kind of retelling the story, you have the decision to decide the focus of the ending of the story. So this one soldier makes a sacrifice, and the other soldiers either lie to his family and tell him that like he died in glorious battle or something, or they tell them the truth, and it's like he kind of did this somewhat shameful act, but for the purpose of saving the rest of us. And you, as the player, have the option to choose that ending. So you get to make this decision on like what is the true ending, or what is the ending that you identify with. And that's kind of a major part of Icewind Dale's story, is what is the significance of Jared's sacrifice? Did he do the right thing, or did he do the wrong thing? And I really appreciated that in the storytelling in Icewind Dale, that like it does kind of showcase the reality of the world, the interpretation of history. Like these are the facts of what happened, and you as an individual get to choose what the meaning of the facts is. And I think there's some ambiguity there, but that's the real world. That's what it's like to hear those stories and say like, oh, they were a hero, or no, they were a dumbass.
Yeah. And if you're big into the immersion, this won't bug you, but they don't, think about where you're at. You're in the frozen area, and you're only going to more frozen areas. A lot of the themes of some of the high level dungeon where you go, or there's ice everywhere. It's called Icewind Dale, right? You're way up north, and there's hardly any shops. You just don't have a place to sell your things. So if you're really into the immersion, you're gonna be like, oh, this is fine. I shouldn't be running into a traveling merchant or a city that, every 5 minutes. Oh, that's true. You will not get a merchant for a very, very, very long time. And that to me I don't think is very good. There is probably a better way of doing this, but there is that.
You will pick up a lot of crap gear between merchants.
It's like, I have this good item. I have this good item. I have these quest items that I have to have. And it becomes like an inventory management thing out of Resident Evil. And it's like, I don't need that in this type of game, but
yeah.
So
there's definitely that piece of it. And I feel like every Baldur's Gate game gets better with a bag of holding.
Mm-hmm. Well,
but,
I think there is a way to integrate this, and I think Larian sees the opportunity there if they were to take it, because you could also have a camp where you have a merchant. There could be a random merchant or two they're taking a path. Every time you camp, you could stumble upon one. There could be one in your camp that says, hey, look, you don't mind if I stay here? And then if you can make that something a viable thing, here and there, that would be nice. Like, obviously, if you're in the middle of a dungeon somewhere, there's not going to be one. But if you're out in the world, there could be a person there and make it happen. I really think that there's a way to do it. But
yeah, there's definitely a way to basically integrate what was done in Icewind Dale and improve upon it. I don't think that game was so flawed that there's no place for it in modern, like, Wizards of the Coast storytelling campaign. So I definitely think there's a very simple way to return to that IP and continue with it with something similar to what we saw with Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah, and Bogu has played a lot of Icewind Dale on top of it. And so, Bogu, if you're listening, he's been considering coming to the podcast as a guest. Give us some more insight to it, because I know with the Baldur's Gate mods and stuff, they have incorporated some of those spells that you mentioned that you like, because they're part of the 3.5 rules or something that are just not in Baldur's Gate, the original games. And they just kind of said, okay, well, you can have those too. So it kind of works.